I started my year by reading 20 of Booktube's best and worst books of the year. Welcome back to the chaos that is Shani and books. Today's video is very exciting because I am reading Booktuber's favorite books. The time of the year where all of the Booktubers put out their videos about their best books of the year is my absolute favorite. I love seeing everyone gushing about the books that they love, but I also love adding to my TBR. In the last couple of years, I have begun my year by reading a bunch of books that Booktubers mention in their favorites videos. This is certainly not my idea. A lot of Booktubers do this now, and I don't even know who to credit for the original idea at this point. I know that Kayla is one of the Booktubers that I've been watching do this the longest. I love when she does these vlogs, and I've made it into 2 of them now, which is like my Booktube life goal achieved. The previous times that I've done this, I have had rules for myself. Like if someone mentioned a book and I already owned it on my shelves, I automatically had to read it, or that I had to read the books that were mentioned the most amount of times in the videos that I watched. This year, I wanted to take it easy on myself, so I just picked whatever I was interested in or whatever I thought I would like. However, all of the books that I did end up reading depended on my access to it and whether or not my library had it, because I'm not purchasing books at this current moment. So I also tend to get in over my head with these types of vlogs, so I was planning to just choose a few books instead of the 15 that I normally pick each year, but then I just kept adding books and I just couldn't resist. I'm filming this intro at the end of my reading experiment, but I will cut to the clip where I am building my TBR. In this clip, I was just planning, and not all of the books that I mention end up being books that I read, but I will link all of the Booktubers that I talk about, even if I didn't end up reading a book recommended by them. At the point I was building my TBR, not all of the Booktubers had put out their favorites videos, so I kind of like edited in the best that I could, anyone who I saw posting after I'd filmed that intro. And I also counted honorable mentions. Even if the honorable mentions were not even in the favorites video, if it was an entirely separate video, I still counted it simply because I wanted to. Starting off with one of the books that had the most mentions that I saw is Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries. This one I don't have a physical copy of. I have it on hold at the library. I was second in line and I think I'm first in line now. I actually have had this on hold for like months before people even started releasing their favorites videos. So I'm very excited that I think I'm going to get my copy around the time that I'm filming this, and I think I'll be able to include it. But I did see this on Riley, Rachel, Kayla, Michaela, and Jenny's favorites list. Since recording this, I did see Lexi put it in her favorites, but it was also on Sydney's worst list, and it was on Jan's worst list, which should be interesting to see. Next up, I do have a romance book. This one, I've got it on hold at my library, but it doesn't look like they have the copies in yet, so I don't know if this will come in time. But it is a romance, which is risky because I haven't loved romance, but there's like a magical realism element, so I'm thinking it might work for me. But The 7 Year Slip by Ashley Poston was mentioned in Gabby's favorites, Hayley Pham's, Deja's, and it was in Kayla's honorable mentions. Next up, I was very excited to be able to include this because I wanted to read it as soon as possible anyway, because I need to. But Alone with You in the Ether by Olivia Blake was mentioned on Katie Colson, Jack Edwards, and Lexi's list, as well as Chanel, who unfortunately has not posted a video in a while. We miss your videos, Chanel, but she did put an Instagram post up of her favorite books of the year that this was on. Favorites list, and then Gabby's honorable mentions, and then interestingly it was on Riley's worst books list. This one I do need to get. How do ARCs work? Because I got approved for an e-arc for this book, but like it's already out. Like I already own the full published finished edition copy. What were those words? But I also have like an e-arc. I don't know. But either way, I need to read it so that I can leave my review on NetGalley. So that one's a definite. Next, we have one that I got for Christmas. I'm very excited to get to this one. So I'm so glad that people put it on their favorites list. But Natural Beauty by Ling Ling Huan was on Kayla and Jenny's favorites list and Gabby's honorable mentions. I think this is going to be one of the first books I get to. Another one that I got for Christmas that I'm very excited that I'm going to get to include. I have Chlorine by Jade Song. This one was on Katie Colson's favorites list, and it was on the honorable mentions list for Kayla and Gabby. Next up, we have a non-fiction book, which I'm so excited that I get to include. I have it on hold from my library. I'm going to go and pick it up tomorrow. This one is a 5-star prediction for me. It is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This one was on Jack Edwards and Jenny's favorites list. I have another romance. It's also, I think, a second chance romance, which I tend to not like, although 7 Days in June is a second chance romance, and that's one of my favorites. Anyway, I'm excited to give it a go. It is Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. This was on Jenny's favourites list and Gabby's honourable mentions. Next up, I feel like I have to read this one. If I don't read it for this video, I feel like I should just get rid of it. But The Good Sister by Sally Hepworth. I had this on a couple of TBRs in 2023 and I never got to it. And this one was on Hayley Hughes's favourites list. And I also saw Naomi, who hasn't put out a video, but I saw on Instagram she posted her favourites books and this was on it. And she is a booktuber, but she hasn't posted her favourites. I don't know if she's going to make a video, but either way, I'm including her. And I really want to love Sally Hepworth. She is an Australian author and I don't know why I'm always so scared to pick this one up. But the next book I was close to reading for Booktubers favourites last year, so I definitely need to pick it up this year. This one is Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. This one was on Sid's favourites of the year list and Kayla's honourable mentions. This next one, I don't have a copy. I have it on hold from the library, but I don't think it'll come in time. So I don't know, we'll see. But Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. I would like to read it in January if I can get to it because it is Gabby's book club pick. So it works out good to be able to do one book for two things. But this one is on Meg's list, Ashley's and Cindy's favourites list. And the premise sounds really intriguing. Another one that's a two birds with one stone book, but They're There by Tommy Orange was on Jack Edwards' favourites list. I have this one that I need to pick up from the library tomorrow and it needs to be read in January because the Buzzwordathon by Kayla, the January word is there. So this one definitely needs to get read. Next we have another book that I almost read for this video last year, The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. I have loved quite a few books from this author, so I'm hoping I love this one too, and this one was on Meg's favourites list. I'm hesitant to add this one in because it wasn't on anyone's like actual favourites list, but Lessons in Chemistry is my book club pick for January, so I'm going to have to read it in January anyway, so I may as well include it in the video. But it was on Gabby's honourable mentions list, but it was in Sid's worst books list, so I am intrigued to see what I think of it. And then I have some books that I'm thinking are options. I saw Riley have as one of her favorite books, or it was her number one favorite book, is Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson, which it intrigues me, but it's a horror book and some of the Goodreads reviews, people were saying that like people's reviews were just like, what the fuck was that? So I'm kind of nervous about it, but it's very short. It's like a 200-page sapphic horror book. So if I can access it, I feel like that might be a fun one to add. And then the other book I'm considering is Rachel Harrison has been in a couple of favorites videos. Deja and Naomi had Black Sheep as one of their favorites. So did Jan. But Hayley Hughes had Such Sharp Teeth and Cackle by this author on her list. So I feel like because she's been mentioned so many times, I have to read a Rachel Harrison book, but I don't know which one. Like Black Sheep was mentioned more, but the premise for Such Sharp Teeth and Cackle intrigued me more. And I'm leaning towards Cackle because one, in Hayley's favorites video, she really sold me on it. And she did say that it would be a good horror for people who are just getting into horror, which I do have a few favorite horror books, but it's very light horror. So that's why I'm leaning towards that one. The second reason is because it has a purple cover and I think it's about witches. And Winterween, which is Gabby Reed's readathon, is starting tomorrow. And one of the prompts is a book with a purple cover and a book with witches. So again, I'm a two birds, one stone person here. So I'm thinking maybe Cackle. I'm gonna keep an eye out for more people's favorites videos because maybe someone else has mentioned a Rachel Harrison book, but at the moment that's my thought process. I do also have a copy of Bookshops and Bonedust that I got for Christmas, which was on Sid's favorites list, so that could be added. And the book You Again was on Cindy's favorites list and Jan's list. It's a romance book, but the premise really intrigued me. Deja also mentioned a book called Not So Perfect Strangers, which I'm not sure if I am in the headspace to read or not, but it does sound interesting. I've talked you through my thought process for the TBR. I will update you when I have either confirmed something or read something. This is the point that I should have started reading, but guess who started their year in a reading slump? I hadn't finished a book and it had been not one, not two, not 3, 4, 5. We're not going to talk about how many days it had been before I finished a book. But basically I changed tactics and decided the best way to tackle a slump was to reread and continue a series and read a graphic novel. So then I decided to add to the TBR for the video. So I added the Tea Dragon series, which I saw Michaela and Jordaline mention in their favorites, as well as Heartstopper Volume 5, which Gavin and April mentioned. I also had out from the library The Woman in Me, which Gavin, April and Jessie all had in their favourites. And lastly, April mentioned Neverlanders, the graphic novel, and 3 picture books. So I started with all of these books to give me a little bit of boost of momentum to the start of the reading year and to get me out of the slump. But I'll add the clip for these added books to the TBR at the end, even though I read them at the beginning. Now let's cut to me post slump. While I know that I'm going to really regret this later when I'm editing it, I do feel like it is fitting for me to be wearing a paw strip while I'm talking about this book. Natural Beauty is following this main character who gets a job at this workplace that is about all things beauty, so like Botox, eyelash extensions, etc. And it is technically a horror book, so while she is initially excited to be working at this new job, she ends up noticing things that are not really adding up about the workplace. Obviously, I can't spoil the book for you, but I will say that I used to think that I was not a horror reader. I thought horror was not for me. I'm a baby. I can't read anything that's scary. But reading things like this is telling me that I think I need to explore the genre a lot more in this new year, because I really loved this. I think I'm going to give it 5 stars. I cannot say too much without it being spoilers, but there was some reveals that happened regarding some of the side characters that kind of made me just go, oh yeah, this is going to be a new favourite. What does the back actually say that I can reveal? Okay, yeah, she gets a job. She becomes transfixed by Helen, who is the niece of the owner, and they develop a friendship. All the while, our narrator is piled with products that slim her thighs, smooth her skin, and lighten her hair. But beneath these creams and tinctures lies something sinister. It explores questions of consumerism, self-worth, race, and identity, and leaves readers with a shocking and unsettling truth. I just feel like I enjoy this type of book, but also this topic was quite interesting. We are moving towards such a dystopian world within the topic of beauty, because people are going on their lunch breaks from their jobs to just go and get Botox. Like, it's so bizarre that it's just normalized to change your appearance so much, which is stupid of me to say with a paw strip on my nose. But yeah, we're in this weird world where it's just normalized. And people, mostly women, are expected to have this standard of beauty. There was a trend recently where like young girls were absolutely horrified in the comment section of videos of people in their 30s who were like, oh yeah, this is my 30-year-old skin with no cosmetic procedures. And young girls are like, oh, this is my worst nightmare. I think because it's just been so normalized to get Botox and fillers and everything, and like wrinkles. Like, when you think of wrinkles, you're thinking of like an 80-year-old at this point. Do you remember the book The Uglies, the book series The Uglies, where it was like this dystopian future where when you reach a certain age, you go from being an ugly to a pretty, and you go through like cosmetic procedures, and then you're officially a pretty. That honestly does not seem so dystopian at this point, because like it's just bizarre. So I really enjoyed the topic that was discussed, but the actual storytelling, like the way the book was told, it actually reminded me of this book, The Center. I won't get it down, but that was one of my favorites of last year, and it's kind of a similar thing. A main character who goes to a place, a workplace, or a place of learning. The main character in both is becoming friends with someone involved in the business, and both times, you know, weird things are happening behind the scenes that the main character is slowly finding out about. So I definitely think that if you liked either one, you should maybe try the other. And if you have any suggestions of other books that are similar to both in this type of horror, then please recommend them to me, because I would like to try out more. Because I feel like if I'm going to like horror, it's going to be something like this, where it's not like scary, or I guess, I don't know. Does horror need to be scary? I don't know. Is this scary? I don't know anything. But all I know is that I enjoyed it and I'm happy I read it. So I'm really going to hate myself when I edit this clip back. I am at the point in my life where I don't really read young adult books anymore, just because I never end up enjoying them. But I think that Tiffany D. Jackson is one of the only young adult authors that I feel comfortable continuing to pick up, because it's not really fair if I'm picking up books that I'm not going to like. But she's one of the only young adult authors that I continue to give high ratings to. And I guess she could also be considered one of my favorite authors, since 2 of her other books have both made favorites lists of the year for me. I'm sure based on what I'm saying, you can kind of gather what I thought of this book. It is technically a Carrie retelling, I haven't actually read Carrie. I originally had planned to read Carrie before reading this one, but I think I talked about it in a video one time, and I did receive a comment of someone saying they read Carrie and then directly after they read this book and they didn't like it as much due to that and recommended that I should just read this. So yeah, I skipped Carrie and I just read this one. But to be honest, the premise of this book does sound like something I would be more interested in compared to Carrie anyway. Basically, in this one, we are following this young girl. She is mixed race, but she's been passing as white. She lives in this really racist small town, and she has a very racist dad who does not want anyone knowing that his daughter is half black. So he tells her that she needs to make sure that her hair is always straightened and makes her check the weather every day to make sure that it's not going to rain to ruin her straight hair. One day she is at school and a storm unexpectedly comes. It rains, her hair gets wet, and all of her classmates see that she has been hiding the natural texture of her hair in order to pass as white. Obviously, we all know, I've talked about it a million times, but books that talk about being mixed race, talking about race, is something that I tend to enjoy. So of course, this is what appealed to me about this particular book. Another thing that I liked is we're getting chapters in between like the main storyline that were like from a podcast or like a radio show or something after the fact of people who are like investigating what happened. Obviously, since this is a Carrie retelling, we already know that there is something big that happens at the school prom. So I think because it is a retelling and people kind of already know the main storyline of Carrie, it was cool to have that little podcast element that is set after everything goes down just in between. One of the people on the podcast or the radio show, I've already forgot, I don't know what it was, but she was Australian, so you know I love when an Australian pops up in a book. Overall, I don't know if I want to give it a full 5 stars. I don't know, I'm still working on my ratings now that I'm using Storygraph, and you can put 0.25, 0.5 and 0.75 onto things. So maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll think about it and end up giving it a 5, but for now, I don't know, we'll say in the 4 point something range, 4.5, 4.75, I don't know. But that's just my thoughts for now, and I will continue to pick up Tiffany D. Jackson. And so we have another success for this vlog. I don't want to expose my own personal family situation on the internet, but this book certainly felt a little too close to home in some parts, in some very specific ways. I knew this was following siblings, and we know, I've spoken about on my channel a few times that I really enjoy books that have some sort of sibling aspect in it. And this was such a specific sibling dynamic that I liked. In this book, we are following siblings Byron and Benny. Their mother has just recently passed away, and they have been left a black cake that they are told that they need to share when the time is right, and also an audio recording from their mother that revealed a lot of things that they did not prior know. And they are told that they need to listen to this audio recording together. One, like, I guess critique, not even a critique, that I had about reading this is that I was getting kind of confused by the characters. Obviously, the siblings are named Byron and Benny, and then there was also a character named Bunny, and I was starting to get really confused with all the characters because we were being introduced to quite a few characters. However, now that I'm finished with the book, I feel like that was probably a purposeful thing. I did tab this, and there was at one point the brother Byron even mentioned while listening to the audio recording, he was like, should I be taking notes? Literally tabbed that and was like, I feel the same. But I was correct in predicting that this would be 5 stars for me because that is the exact rating that I gave it. I did put this book in my 5-star predictions about 6 months ago, and yeah, this was just really the book for me. So I've had this sitting on my shelf for a while, and I'm so happy that I finally read it. Another success for the video, and we'll move on. However, I am getting nervous because I'm having so much luck that I'm worried that we're gonna get a book that I don't like coming up soon, but regardless, I'm having a good time. This book follows 12 different Indigenous characters who are following all their separate stories, but they do end up kind of all interconnecting towards the end as all of the characters are traveling to the same powwow. It does sound like a book that would be perfect for me, and I'm not exactly sure like what the exact thing about it was that made it not really work for me as much as I had hoped or as much as I had expected it to. There was one scene towards the end that really hit me, and I was close to tearing up just because of the topic and the actual thing that it revolved around is just something that always gets to me personally. But yeah, I'm not sure if it's the way it was written or I don't know how to describe it, which is really annoying for this review actually. But I don't know how to pinpoint it or explain further than that. There was one scene, for example, where one character ends up shitting themselves. I don't know why I whispered that. I think I wasn't sure if I was going to say the word shit or not, but now I've already said it and I've just said it again. But I don't know, it was just scenes like that that I think that the writing wasn't for me, which is totally fine because not every single book in the world is going to be for every single person. I did really, really appreciate all of the stories that were being told in it though, and obviously some parts were really emotional for me. I also really liked that I read a book from an Indigenous author from another part of the world. Obviously I am in Australia and I do try and pick up Indigenous Australian stories, but this is obviously not set in Australia. So yeah, I don't know, I'm glad I read it and it counted for the buzzword reading challenge, but I think I'm going to stick to around a 3-star rating for me. But it is something that I would recommend to other people if it is their style, but it just wasn't perfect for me. However, I appreciate what it did. Hopefully I'm conveying my thoughts well enough for that, but that is this book. I don't even know what to say for this book, and I don't know what I can even say without crying. Firstly, the writing of this book is incredible. It is a memoir that is detailing the author's experience being in an abusive relationship with another woman, and it is told in like little vignettes, so like some of the chapters are quite short. Can you even see anything I'm showing you? I don't know. One part that I did want to highlight is that one section is written as like a choose your own adventure book, so it talks about something that has happened, and then at the bottom of the page that you probably can't see, it says, if you apologize profusely, go to page 190. If you tell her to wake up next time your elbows touch her in your sleep, go to page 191. If you tell her to calm down, go to page 193. Obviously, it continues and tells you the different pages to go to, but then the way it's written, it will cycle back to like, if you apologize, go to page 190. I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but basically the way that the choose your own adventure is set up, it will go back in a circle, which I think is such a clever way of showing the cycle of abuse. If you don't know what that is, I think it's probably a good idea to look up. It's something that is a good thing for people to be aware of, but I just obviously gave this 5 stars and everyone should read it. I honestly haven't decided on my rating for this book yet. I think I'm going to wait until after the live discussion, because anyone in the chat might sway my opinion either way, because this was my January book club book for my book club, and I definitely think this had the potential to become a favorite for me, but I ended up feeling that it was somewhere in like the 3 to 4 star range. But looking back through my annotations, I do think it's closer to 4 stars, so maybe I'll go with 4. This was recently adapted into a TV show, so I think it's popular enough that you probably know what it is about, but it is set during the 50s and 60s. We are following this main character named Elizabeth Zott. She is a scientist and a woman who is not treated very well by the people around her in a number of circumstances, and through a series of events in her life, she ends up meeting this man who offers her a job on a TV show, starring in a TV show, on afternoon TV cooking. What does the synopsis even say? Like, I obviously don't want to spoil things. Okay, and soon a legion of overlooked housewives find themselves daring to change the status quo, one molecule at a time. Yeah, basically, it's very feminist, and I obviously love, you know, the way that Elizabeth was standing up for herself during these times in a way that many other women were not, or were not able to, or thought that they couldn't. So those were the aspects that I really enjoyed in this book. However, it is very, very man-hating. And while I am in my hating men era, I don't think I really want a book where there are absolutely 0 good men in it, because it's just really, really reinforcing the fact that I hate men at the moment. Like, there were meant to be, I think, some men who were supposed to be likable for us. or I don't know if they were supposed to be, but none of them were good. So I obviously don't want to get into spoilers. I will go through spoilers in my live show. So if you have read this and you do want to hear my thoughts, the replay should be on my channel to watch. But yeah, I was definitely highlighting and underlining a lot of relatable things to being a mum, to being a woman, just to the way that Elizabeth was treated. But yeah, I think I was just hoping for at least one like kind of feel-good aspect in this, and it wasn't really a feel-good read, which not all books have to be, but I just felt like what was missing was like maybe just a bit more of that feel-good vibe. I don't know if that was just me. What was confirmed by the author is that the US cover, which I'll insert, she does not like. I found, and I'll talk about this in my live show, but I did find a comment where someone had posted and said, does anyone feel like, I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically they were saying, does anyone hate the pink chiclety women's fiction-esque cover? And the author commented back and said, yeah, actually, and I'm the author, but I told the publisher that that's not what I wanted and I don't get to make that decision. They basically said, no, we know what sells. And it's just so ironic because this book is about pretty much that exact thing happening to Elizabeth. Like, she's saying, no, I want to be myself on the TV show. Like, I'm a scientist, I want to cook in the way that I like to cook. And the producers were saying, no, that's not what women want. Women want someone who smiles and is like the typical 50s housewife. And she's like, no, I don't want to do that. And they were like kind of forcing her into it. And like that exact thing happened with the book cover. Like, is that not like so just crazy? And the author even said she didn't like it, but the publishers were like, no, we know what sells. We know what women want. Like, that's just so crazy to me that like the inside of the book happened with the cover. Like, how crazy. But I did also find an author interview, and the author did say that she started writing the book. She went to like a work meeting or something, and she experienced some sexism towards herself, I'm guessing from some males, and it made her really mad. And so she came home and started writing the book. And yeah, that is my final thoughts on this. Is I can tell that she was pretty mad at men when she wrote this book, which is fine. I am also mad at men at many times in my life. But yeah, I was kind of hoping for a little bit more feel good, I think, when I went into this. But maybe that's my own fault for not really knowing that the vibe of this book was definitely like, we're angry at men sort of thing. But I don't know, I'm gonna stop going on about it because I'm probably going to have an hour-long discussion on my channel talking about this book. So I don't need to extend this vlog. If you want to hear more about it, I'll leave the live linked. But this was like a semi-success. I originally was going to say 3.5, but looking at my annotations, it can't be 3.5. It has to be either 3.75 or 4. We'll call it a success though. We know that fantasy is not my most read genre, and that I've just been dipping my toes back into the fantasy books. This series is said to be high fantasy with low stakes, which you really have me at the low stakes, but you lose me at the high fantasy. I loved Legends and Lattes. I actually had it in my favorites of the year video for last year. But if I'm honest with you, I was really just there for the vibes. Being in a different world with creatures that I have no idea what they're meant to be is where I personally get a little lost, which is obviously not the fault of the book whatsoever. So it is in no way a critique of the book whatsoever. It's more just an explanation of my own personal reading tastes. But I think I did enjoy Legends and Lattes a little bit more because it was a little more boring. And I'm using boring as a compliment in this sense. I can't think of like a better word to use in its place. It was just basically there was less happening that I needed to follow. I mean, thankfully in this book we had pages on the front to help me know what they look like. But in this one we had creatures like dwarfs and gnomes, and I was pretty much just picturing garden gnomes, which I know has to be wrong. And then we had a Tepenti and homunculus, and I still really enjoyed my reading experience, and I love that it was set in a bookshop. Some of my favorite parts were to do with books. There was one part where Viv, the main character, was given a book and was told it's a mystery, and she's like, what, you don't know what it's about? And she was told like, no, it's a mystery book, that's the genre, you have to solve the mystery. And she says, oh, they need this many pages to do that. And there was another part where they decide for the bookshop that they want to wrap up the books in paper and write little hints about what the book is on the front to give people an idea about like what the book is about, but it's like a secret surprise book. which is obviously like the blind date with a book that we have. So it's really fun being in this different world where they are experiencing things that like we have for the first time. Obviously Legends and Lattes was about introducing coffee to all of these magical creatures. This one is in a bookshop. But yeah, there was definitely a lot more things to follow that I clearly did not follow the best. So I think I'm gonna go with like a 4.5. I think I will reread this in the future. I think if I reread it in the future, I will probably understand more of the parts that I missed in this time around. So I think I will do that one day because I definitely want to reread Legends and Lattes as well. So I know that Black Sheep clearly had the most amount of mentions here. So that should have been my choice for the Rachel Harrison selection. But I did end up going with Cackle. In the end, I do feel good about my choice for choosing Cackle because when I looked on Goodreads, I saw that Jan, who was one of the people that had Black Sheep on her list, she actually gave Cackle 5 stars as well. So I think I can just consider it a recommendation from her anyway. I don't know why though it took me so long to finish this book. I originally had intended to start it for Winterween, which was at the beginning of the month. But I've only just finished it and it's been like a month. I did end up having to get the audiobook for like the last 100 pages because my eyes were hurting. So I don't think it was a fault of the book. I don't know why. But in this book, we are following a main character named Annie. Her boyfriend has just broken up with her. And so she moves, gets a different job in a small town. And in that small town, she meets this other woman named Sophie. And Sophie is beautiful and charming and Annie wants to be her friend. And Sophie is encouraging Annie to live for herself and get over her ex. Annie is like enamored by her and wants to spend all of her time with her. But then she starts noticing some odd things about Sophie. This is technically a horror book and I do think that Hayley's suggestion was right about recommending it to people who are just getting into horror or looking for beginner horror books, so I am glad that I chose it. I have been reading horror more lately, but up until this point I had been avoiding the genre altogether. I just thought that I was not a horror reader and I was too much of a baby and that it was going to scare me, and I just thought I was too soft for horror. And I do think I'm still finding my footing in the genre, but this is one that particularly did work for me because it wasn't going to leave me with nightmares and I wasn't going to be throwing up from graphic scenes. But I do think that if you are someone who reads a lot of horror and you do like gross and graphic and scary things, that maybe you would be disappointed if you didn't know that prior to going into this book, that the horror isn't as much as you're maybe used to. But I do love a small town setting and a female friendship and slightly unhinged women, as well as a bit of a witchy vibe. There were also quite a few quotes that I was highlighting during reading. So overall, I think this was a success. And I think my rating would probably be somewhere in the 4 to 5 range. I think I'll just say 4.5 for now. But I think we can call this one a success. This was a book that was featured in the most people's favorites list of the books that I chose for this video, but also the most least favorites list. So I was very intrigued to find out what I would think of it. Not to repeat myself about another book that I talked about in this video already, but this also falls under the high fantasy, low stakes kind of fantasy. And once again, I'm here for the low stakes, but I'm lost the high fantasy. I don't think I need to waste time telling you the synopsis of this one because 1, people have been talking about it so much that I feel like you already know, but 2, the title is pretty much it. Emily Wilde is creating an encyclopedia about fairies. I wanted to love this so much. I wanted to love you so much. But in all honesty, I think I was kind of lost with all the like fairy politics. Around the halfway point, I really started to get into it more. But as someone who's not a big fantasy girly, it's the magical creatures that I get all muddled up with, I think. I mean, I've read fantasy books before that I've enjoyed, but a lot of them are middle grade or like young adult where things are spelled out a lot. But I really loved the cozy vibes and I really loved like following the characters, even though I was a little lost. But I think that I want to give myself a few months and then reread it, because I think I would probably have a better grasp on the things that I got lost in the first read through the second time around. I definitely didn't hate it. I just wasn't in love with it as much as everyone else seems to be. I know that my review so far sounds like I hated it. I did not hate it. I'm thinking I'm gonna go with like a 3.5 or a 3.75 because I just don't think it's a 4 for me personally. But I do honestly think that if I reread it, I could love it as much as everyone else does. You know how I said that I am still trying to find my type of horror? I really loved this. This one is about this teenage girl who is becoming a mermaid. And I was unsure about what type of horror it was going to be and whether or not the mermaid transformation was going to be like a metaphorical thing or like what was going to happen. I don't think I expected what actually happened. And I will say that we know I am a beginner horror reader, and there were some pages where I was kind of like turning the pages like this to be like, oh my god, what's happening next? What's happening next? So I definitely don't think I'm going to be diving straight into the horror genre and picking up too much from the genre, but I do think the things that I have read so far, I think I kind of know which ones to pick out, sort of. This also had a lot of discussions about race, which we know I love. But yeah, it's really short. It's only like 200 pages. But I will say one thing, yeah, it's 220 pages. But there was like a section of time where I was like, okay, this is feeling a little dragged out, which is weird for a book that's only 220 pages. But I think when it comes to horror, I definitely like the weird, short horror books. Like, I don't really like when things are getting a little too dragged out. And I do think it got a little slow at one point where I was like, okay, like we can move on now. But this is also a debut and an Asian author, and there were a lot of queer elements in here. There was like a sapphic little storyline. There was also a character in here that seemed to just use they pronouns. I just thought that it was really good, and I don't want to make this video too long, so my review is going to stay that short, but I think I'm gonna go with like, I don't know if I want to rate it a 5. The first half I was like, yes, this is definitely like a new favorite, it's a 5. But then we did reach that slow section. I don't know. If I'm not giving it a 5, it's like a 4.75. So to be determined, but we'll call it a win. It's potentially a 5, and if it's not a 5, it's very close to it. And I'm very happy that I loved this one because I love the cover. It is so cool. And apparently I love mermaids. Oh my god, I just realized I have a mermaid tattoo. I'm saying just realized as if it hasn't been like inked onto my body for the last like 7 years. But I do have a mermaid tattoo that like goes down my ribs that has no meaning. I just got it on a whim when I was on holiday in Byron Bay one time. Do I love mermaids now? Do I need to find more mermaid books? I need to find more mermaid books. Sorry for the tangent, but yeah, loved it. While I was reading this book, I definitely was thinking to myself, people are either going to absolutely love it or absolutely hate it. And based on the reviews that I was reading, it does seem to be the case. This one I think is technically a romance book. However, if you are someone who generally enjoys the traditional, very fluffy romances, I don't know how else to describe them, but just the very traditional romance formula that you see, then you probably either not enjoy this or you need to adjust your expectations before you start it. I would recommend this for people who generally enjoy literary fiction, because I do think that this one reads kind of like a lit fic book in a way. So yeah, like I said, this would be considered a romance because we are focusing on the relationship between the two main characters, but it's also definitely just a character book. And I clearly, from some of my reviews already just in this video, I don't care about the plot. Nothing could be happening and I could care less. Sometimes I struggle to even follow the plot that is in the books. I'm definitely a character person. If I'm interested in the characters and what they're saying and what they're doing, then I will be on board for the book, even if the plot is virtually non-existent. I guess there is a plot to this because the whole idea is the romance with each other. But the female main character named Regan in this book is someone who is diagnosed with bipolar, I think is what they said on page. And in the acknowledgements, which I did read, the author did talk about her diagnosis with bipolar disorder. And she did say like the character isn't meant to be her, but it is good to know that she is writing from personal experience of being someone with a mood disorder. And there's a lot of talk about this main character being in therapy and not wanting to take medication and not feeling like herself when she's on medication. And I personally cannot relate to a character who has bipolar disorder. However, I do appreciate reading about it because I'm trying to think of whether or not I have read many other books that spoke about that much. I did find myself relating more probably to the male main character, who to me read quite neurodivergent. He definitely felt like he was on the spectrum, it's not written as such, but I quite liked reading from him. And the writing in this book, which I don't know how I haven't even talked about the writing yet. I started reading this physically, but I was getting a lot of headaches. So I also got the audiobook, and then I ended up also getting the ebook because I wanted to highlight. So I got the ebook and like maximized the font size all the way up. So I need to transfer my annotations over to the physical copy, but there were so many just beautiful quotes just in the writing in general. If you're not someone who likes like overly flowery writing, then you won't like this. But if you do like that, then you will like this. Because there was just some really beautiful quotes, but also there was just some really like relatable topics being discussed. It was also like an interesting way it was written at the beginning, because this is the very first page, so it's not a spoiler. There's like a block of text and then it says scene, and then it says something, and then it's like action. It's kind of like a written, like, I don't know, like a play. And then the next one says the narrator. And then there was a section, but that only went on like a little bit at the start. And then there was like a chapter at the end. I quite liked it. I almost wish it went all the way through, although will that be too much? Either way, don't want to make this clip too long. But if you are someone who likes to read about people who feel like very real people, like they're imperfect, they are making human choices, and it doesn't feel like you're reading two fictional, fluffy, cookie cutter romance characters. If you want to read real people, then this is the type of romance for you. But I can definitely see why people would dislike it. Like I said, I feel like it looked like in the reviews people were falling for either one side or the other. I enjoyed it, but I don't think I'm gonna give it 5 stars. I'm gonna go with like 4.25. Because now that I can use the points in my rating, I can be more selective with what I give a 5. I don't know. I am glad that I read this one finally, and this author is Filipino as well, so you know I love that. But yeah, I started off the year in a reading slump, so I decided to get a hold on this slump, and my tactic for that was a reread and a graphic novel. So I decided to reread The Tea Dragon Society so that I can continue on with this series. I owned this first copy, but I had not read books 2 and 3 in the series. But I did see recently that my library had them, and I had been meaning to go and check them out, and now is the perfect time because it fits for this vlog. So I've added in a bunch of books that were not originally on my TBR, but now they are. So like I said, I reread this one, and then I checked out from the library the 2 big hardcovers, and like the size. Can we just talk about the size difference between my paperback and the original hardcovers? And I do think that I need to get a handle on my rating system for graphic novels. Like, I think I know my rating system for like regular novels, but for graphic novels, I feel like all the time I'm like, yes, love that, 5 stars. I originally gave this one 5 stars when I read it the first time a couple of years ago. But I think now that I'm rereading it, I did not enjoy it as much as the sequels. So I think I'm gonna give my official rating for this one a 4. I mean, I loved them all, but just so you know, this one is my least favorite of all of them. I think it's just because it's the shortest. There's like less time to spend in the world with the characters. Like, I wanted it to be longer. So this one I think is a 4. And then I think the Tea Dragon Festival is my favorite. So this one is the 5. This one could probably also be a 5 or maybe a 4.5. I don't know. Maybe they're both 5s. Okay, maybe we'll call these 2 5s, but I think the Tea Dragon Festival is my favorite. If you do not know what these books are about, we are basically following this group of characters who are in this world where tea dragons exist, and it is just very cozy and cute. Definitely gives me like Legends and Lattes vibes, but in a graphic novel form, because there are characters in here who were bounty hunters. I've already forgotten what the plot is. I think they were bounty hunters or something like that, and they have retired and they are now working with these tea dragons, and so it kind of gives me the Legends Lattes vibes. I don't know, that could be wrong, but that's how I felt. And yes, it's just very cute. There is disability rep in this, also queer rep, and I also think that the most recent one, the author's name is written as K. O'Neill, and these ones are not. So I think based on the fact that they use the pronoun they in their author bio for the most recent one, I believe that I will not be using the name that's written on this one. So I'm going to go by K. O'Neill, the author K. O'Neill. I read in the author little bio that they are from New Zealand. So they're my neighbour, which is fun because I feel like I don't read enough books from New Zealand authors. So nice to add another New Zealand author to my list. And I'm very glad that I finally read that series. I definitely want to get myself copies of the next 2 books because I love them a lot. So let me go through the other books that I added to my TBR for this vlog when I was in my slump. So first of all, I already had out from my library the Britney Spears memoir, The Woman in Me. So I figured I should read it for this vlog because it kind of works for this vlog as well, and then I can finally return it. And this is, I mean, rating memoirs is difficult. Like, I can't give a number rating to someone's life, but I definitely appreciated reading her story. Obviously, Britney is someone who has gone through a lot, and I am really glad that we're living in a time where people who have grown up in Hollywood and in just this celebrity industry are at a time where we are listening to them rather than the tabloids and getting their stories, and they are able to reveal the crappy behavior that goes on by other celebrities or by people within the industry, because especially people who went into it very young, like Britney was. She was literally a child. People are mistreated so often. The same with Jeanette McCurdy. Like, I love that we're in a time where people are able to speak up and we can expose the industry and be on the celebrity side who have been harmed, because poor Britney, like, poor Britney, that's all I can say. Very well written, loved. I'm really glad I got an insight into the things that Britney has experienced. I wasn't like the hugest Britney Spears fan in the world. My history with Britney Spears is to do with a very specific thing, as always with me. But I grew up with the Britney Spears dance PlayStation game. And on the screen, they would like dance and you had to like press the buttons that correspond. Like, you know the thing. Surely other people know. And I was a dancer growing up, so my favorite thing to do was to set it to like just to play the videos and not have the game, and try and learn all the dances to all the Britney Spears songs. So that is my history with Britney Spears. So I'm very nostalgic for that particular game and all the songs that were featured within that game. There were also some like behind the scenes clips that you could get to watch on the game. And as always with me, there's something weirdly specific to do. Like, I don't even know what to say. Anyway, then I have 4 books that I read because of April. These ones I'm gonna fly through because they're less of you are probably interested in these. But I did read Neverlanders, which is a graphic novel, middle grade retelling of Peter Pan. I really liked the art style in this one. I don't know what I'm gonna rate it yet. I just think that I maybe don't like retellings in the graphic novel format. I don't know. I think I prefer graphic novels with like a fresh story. I don't mind retellings in like regular books, but I don't know that I love them in the graphic novel format. I don't know. I think this is the first one that I've read. Yeah, I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. So that's that one. Then I have My Strange Shrinking Parents. This one is a picture book, and I thought this was amazing and brilliant. It is basically a boy whose parents just keep shrinking and shrinking and shrinking as he grows. They are immigrant parents, and it is basically a metaphor for the fact that immigrant parents are giving so much for their child to have a great life that they are just shrinking away because they're giving so much of themselves, and it was beautiful. Then I have Dirt by Sea. This one is technically a children's book, but it's set up like a graphic novel. So it was a little bit longer to read. This one I loved because if you know anything about me, you know that I went through a very, have I even talked about this? Maybe people don't know this. I don't know. But I have an obsession with van fit outs and converting vans into like camper vans to travel around the country. I've watched many vlogs of people who have made their own van and are traveling Australia, and it is on my bucket list. One day I will do it. Kia and I both get incredibly car sick, so it could be a very long trip, but one day we will get our van and travel around the country, and that is what is happening in this book. Honestly, it was like ready to make me tear up. It is a father and a daughter who are traveling around in the late mother's van, and it is really beautiful, and they get to see Australia, and I love it. And then lastly, because of April, I read Come Together, which is again a picture book. It says things every Aussie kid should know about the First Peoples. And it is exactly that. It is just facts about a lot of things. I think it is a great resource for children. I just realized I wasn't saying the author for any of those picture books, but those are the picture books. Honestly, I was getting a little stressed at the start of this book that I was going to be too old to enjoy it anymore. Thankfully, that was in fact not the case, and I do continue to enjoy and love the Heartstopper graphic novels. Obviously, you would know by now what this series is. We are up to volume 5 and it is 2 boys falling in love. There is so much in these about just fumbling through the teenage years. I wish I had something like this when I was a teenager, honestly. And while I'm sad for my teenage self that I did not, I'm happy for current day teenagers that they do have something like this. Like I said, this is volume 5, and this particular volume was focused on the boys deciding if they should take the next step in their relationship, which honestly I was hesitant about whether or not I wanted to read about teenagers deciding whether or not to have sex, but thankfully it was handled really well, obviously. And the discussions in it, I think, were like age appropriate for the age group that would normally be picking up this type of book. The other thing that was happening in this is one of the boys, Nick, is deciding where he wants to go for university and what he wants to study, which obviously that is a relatable topic for teens who are about to finish high school. Again, wish I had this when I was a teenager, but alas, I'm old. And Twilight is the book that got published while I was in high school, so I was unfortunate to not have the greatest of representation. But yeah, glad I finished this one and looking forward to, but also sad for the final volume. So there you have it. Not counting the picture books, 15 books recommended by I think almost 20 booktubers that I read to kickstart my 2024 reading year. A huge success if you ask me. My favorites were definitely Natural Beauty, In the Dream House, Black Cake, and probably Chlorine if I were to pick out my ultimate favorites that I read. And no, I didn't get to all of the books that I had in my intro. Most of them was simply because I couldn't get the library loan in time, and some of them because I didn't think I was in the right state of mind to read something like that. There were also some really good books that I saw on a lot of lists that I just knew I could not read without putting myself into like an anxious spin, no matter how good they were. I know Monstrilio was mentioned on so many lists and I know it would be amazing, but I just can't read about a child that dies and a grieving mother. I'll just harm my anxious little brain with that one. There were actually a lot of booktubers that mentioned books in that topic that I automatically were out of the running for this video for me. And there were also books that I actually wish that I would have picked. Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead, I think is what it's called, but I think Haley and Jessie both had that on their lists. And at the library the other day, I randomly just saw it sitting on a shelf, so I kind of wish I picked that one now. I think I'll try that one at a later date, but also let me know which books that I didn't end up reading that you think I should read. But thank you so much for watching. If you have made it this far, I'll be trying to link all of the booktubers in the description, even if I didn't end up picking a book from their favorites list. I just love all the booktubers. I love booktube, and that's the end of the vlog.